Hello everybody, this is our first lecture in report writing for business. In this lecture, we will start explaining Chapter 1, Preparation and Planning. The main points of this lecture are an introduction, identify your precise purpose, identify your readership, identify your objectives, identify your resources, think about your content, prepare your framework. An introduction. Economic reports are important, as they are a key component in almost all major decision making. A report is written for a clear purpose and to a particular audience. Specific information and evidence are presented, analyzed, and applied to a particular problem or issue. The information is presented in a clearly structured format, making use of sections and headings so that the information is easy to locate and follow. The report brief outlines purpose, audience, and problem or issues that your report must address, together with any specific requirements for format or structure. An effective report presents and analyzes facts and evidence that are relevant to the specific problem or issue of the report brief. Note that all sources used should be acknowledged and referenced throughout in accordance with the preferred method of your department. A well-written report will demonstrate your ability to understand the purpose of the report brief and follow its specifications, gather, evaluate, and analyze relevant information, structure material in a logical and coherent order, present your report in a consistent manner according to the instructions of the report brief, make appropriate conclusions that are supported by the evidence and analysis of the report, make thoughtful and practical recommendations where required. Accordingly, successful report writing requires a combination of substance and style, having something worthwhile to say and knowing how to say it effectively. Failing to prepare is preparing to fail. The importance of planning and gradually refining the framework for a report can't be stressed too highly. Often writers ignore this aspect or dismiss it as being too mechanical to be worthwhile. As a result, they turn over too quickly into the writing process itself and end up failing to realize their full potential. Accordingly, anything you commit to paper before your overall plan has taken shape is likely to be wasted. Finally, before you write a single word, you must identify your precise purpose, identify your readership, identify your objectives, identify your resources, think about your content, prepare your framework. Collectively, these activities constitute the planning stage of report writing, and the amount of time and thought you spend on them will make a vast difference to the effectiveness of all the work that will follow. Identify your precise purpose. If someone asks you to prepare a report, make sure you know precisely what is expected of you. It's equally important to define your precise purpose when you have initiated the report yourself. By continually thinking about this purpose, you expect to remain relevant through and ensure that everything that should be covered has been covered. Identify your readership. Your aim is to communicate, and the effectiveness of communication is measured by the quality of its reception, not by the quality of its show. So, ask yourself, are the readers alike or mixed? Are they used to reading and understanding reports? Will they be expecting a formal or informal report? How much time will they spend on this report? Are they familiar with the subject? What do they already know? What else will they need to know? What are their attitudes to the subject and to me? What is the relationship between them and me? You should write different things and in different ways when addressing your boss, your staff, or members of the public. Always remember that you will be writing for real people. Similarly, try to write in the way that is most appropriate for your readers. Clearly, the more diverse your readership, the more difficult it is to fill the report at the right level. If one reader is more important than the others, so target the report at him or her. Identify your objectives. What do you hope this report will achieve? What results are you hoping for? What do you want to happen next? Only when you have identified this bottom line, you can begin to concentrate on getting your message across effectively. Here are some possible objectives for a report writer: to inform, to describe, to explain, to instruct, to evaluate and recommend, to provoke debate, to persuade. The information you will include in your report and the way you might arrange it will be dictated largely by your overall objectives. For this reason, the more closely you can identify your objectives, the more useful your report is likely to be. Identify your resources. You need to know what resources will be available to you before, during, and after your project, such as how many working hours have been allocated to it, what is my budget, what equipment or device will be at my disposal, when will it be available, can I reserve a quiet and peaceful room where I can write the report once the project has been completed. Until you know your resources, or possibly your lack of resources, you can't realistically decide what information you will gather or how you will present your findings. Think about your content. Your aim is to make the best use of your limited resources in order to obtain adequate relevant information, which when properly handled and presented will enable you to achieve your precise purpose, meet all your readers' needs, realize your overall objectives. It's often helpful to make use of the Pareto Principle, which states that 80% of what is important is represented by 20% of what exists. This is also known as the 80-20 rule and can be illustrated by the following examples. For example, 80% of horse races are won by 20% of horses in training, and the 80% of a company's revenue is generated by 20% of its customers. And 80% of a speaker's message is contained in 20% of his words. While the 80-20 rule shouldn't be taken factually, it's a very useful concept which will remind you to concentrate on what really matters. Prepare your framework. You are now in a position to think about the overall plan of your report. This is known as the framework. It's like drawing up the plans for a new house. It will not only show its overall structure, it will also remind you of the information you will need to gather before the process of construction can begin. A well-planned framework is the key to effective report writing, since it enables the writer to be sure there is no misunderstanding over the terms of reference, to have an overview of the entire report, to be reminded of what information must be collected and what is needed, to order his or her thoughts before considering how they should be expressed, to increase the significance of and the relationship between the various items of information that will be gathered, and finally to maintain a view while gathering this information and later when writing the report. You may find it necessary to revise this framework once the project has been completed. For example, you might need to highlight some particularly important finding. However, it's far easier to revise a framework than to attempt to structure your findings without an initial plan. The framework you choose will be influenced by the requirements of the person who commissioned the report, house style, custom and conventions, your objectives and your readership, common sense, attract the reader, plain structure. Let's consider each factor in turn. The requirements of the person who commissioned the report. If possible, agree the framework of the report with the person who asked you to produce it. In this way, he or she will be expecting a structure similar to the one you will be providing. After weeks or perhaps months of hard work, it's extremely frustrating to hear those feared words. But I expected you to present it entirely differently from that. House style. Many organizations have their own house style. Knowing this helps the writer and the reader. It also projects the same organizational image to the outside world. Custom and convention. Some routine reports are always presented in the same way, often on standard forms. If you are asked to complete such a report, you will have little or no scope to influence its presentation. Simply refer to previous reports to see what is required. However, if you believe that the existing format could be improved in some way, and if you can justify this, then don't be afraid to say so. Your objectives and your readership. You now know that it helps to establish your objective. Perhaps you intend to persuade your reader to approve the purchase of product A rather than product B. Or perhaps you wish to train your readers how to use a particular item of machinery. Clearly, these are different messages to different audiences, and what you say and how you say it will be strongly influenced by these two factors. The best single piece of advice to bear in mind is never write anything that you wouldn't say to your readers face to face. Common sense. Remember that the task of the report writer is to supply his or her readers with the information they need, in a form they can understand. A report is a means to an end, to inform, to explain, and so on. It's not an end in itself. Your aim, therefore, is to communicate effectively, not to produce a literary masterpiece. Attract the reader. The report will succeed only if it is read without unnecessary delay, it's understood without undue effort, its findings are accepted, and where appropriate acted upon. You are writing for real people, so design a framework that they will find attractive and useful. Where possible, talk to your future readers. What kind of structures would they like to see? Don't promise to meet their every demand, but let them know that their views are important and appreciated. Any reader who feels that a report has been prepared with him or her in mind is unlikely to reject its findings. Finally, plan a structure. Think very carefully about this, because if you can design a suitable framework, everything else will then fall into place. Always remember this saying: tell them what you are going to say, then you say it, then tell them what you said. This may sound tired. It isn't, because it gives you the opportunity to highlight the most important parts of your report. Also, people tend to remember what they read first and last far more than what they read in the middle of any document. So, give them a beginning, a middle, and an end. All reports have a number of commonly recognized components, including the beginning, title page, foreword, preface, acknowledgements, contents page, summary or abstract, introduction, the middle, main body including substructures, the end, conclusions, recommendations, appendixes, references, bibliography, glossary, index. No report ever uses all of them. You can choose the ones best suited to your report, and you may be asked to include one or more of them.